Welcome to our Q&A for the lobby. I am pleased to be joined by the film's director, Heinz Emigholz. Hi, Heinz.
Hello. Hello.
It's especially sad that you couldn't be here for this one, since I know this is actually the film's world premiere, so the people who have just seen it are the first audiences, and I think we're both very curious about
Very curious how people take it.
Yeah. Let's start by just talking a little bit about how this emerged from the other two films that you made with John Erdman, The Last City, which is also in the festival, and Streetscapes Dialogue. Do you see this as part of, I don't know if you want to call it a trilogy or if you call it an ongoing series of films? Or
Gaston Zolnicki, do you know the filmmaker?
Yes.
I met him there and he said, well, I do a film about death in Vienna. So I said, well, okay, that's, the Austrian people always talk about death. Why does he go to Vienna? He could do a film about death in Argentina and in Buenos Aires. So this is, I think, in the back of my mind. And then I thought, well, then I do the film about death in Buenos Aires. And so I started to write these strange kind of texts that came to me by night, usually between 3 and 4. And when I had 2 pages, I called John Erdman in New York, because when I wrote them, I wrote it in English. And I always had his voice in my head when I wrote it. So I called John and said, well, John, tell me, shall I go on writing like this? I don't know what I want to do with it, but I hear your voice in my head when I write it. And if you think it's awful, I will stop immediately, because when I do a film about this or with this, I cannot use another actor. So, and then John was very, very helpful. He said, oh, go on, go on, go on. I sent him pages after pages, and after 1 month, his text was done. Then I didn't even know whether it would be a theater play or whatever. Now we try to do it in Germany as a theater play. But then Joni Perel read it, and then we decided, let's do a film of it. And so 1 year later, there we were in Buenos Aires shooting the film. Yeah, that's how. And we produced it ourselves, like Joni, John, and I produced the film, like, financially. So we had no problems. We didn't have to give the script to anybody to discuss it. I'm not interested in that kind of bullshit. And then we made the film, and now here it is. Yes, okay.
At what point did the idea of the lobby as a setting come into it? Was that there from the start?
Oh, that was for me very, maybe not obvious, but Buenos Aires has these fantastic lobbies in apartment buildings. And I wanted already, and for years I thought already one should do a film about these lobbies, just as an architecture film. Also then on another level, the lobby is this kind of strange space where you go through, like a transitional space. You go to somewhere, you go to the outside or you go to the inside. So it's a kind of waiting area, and you don't live in it, but you use it as a transitional space. So for the theme of the film, which is that the guy is talking about death a lot, so it's a kind of obvious, then for me it was an obvious location for the film. And then as Esteban Bellotto looked for 600 lobbies, he looked, and then we chose 15 or 30 or so.
So the lobby takes the form of a monologue, but in Streetscapes Dialogue and The Last City, there are a series of dialogues. So I'm wondering about this, the shift in form. What was the interest in writing a monologue this time.
Yeah, it's a monologue, but he is addressing the audience. He talks to himself and he talks to the audience. So that's a new thing. He talks to the camera, which is sometimes he talks into a void. So there is a partner, but a kind of imaginary partner there. He talks to like some guy who feels a necessity to express some sorts, and he might even talk to himself, but then there's the camera and he talks into this void, he talks into the black lens as if there's somebody. And of course the film maybe deals a lot with what I think about film too. So that's a way for me to get rid of that.
You said you wrote this while you were in Buenos Aires, just often in the middle of the night.
Yes.
And so it didn't take you very long.
No, I wrote it in 15 days.
And you said the same thing when we were talking about The Last City, about how this process of writing comes, it seems, quite easily to you. I mean, even though
I write all the time. I write. I have notebooks, and what I write and write and write, and sometimes I have the feeling, well, I long for the day where I just start and can't stop anymore. And you have to find the right point where you can write. I mean, you are a writer too. Sometimes you cannot write, you have a blockade, but when you can, you should do it as fast as possible. I am a big fan of Simenon, you know, the writer Georges Simenon, and that's how he wrote his novels. Went into a room, came back after 2 or 3 weeks with a new novel, and sometimes when he didn't make it hold through, he threw it away. I think there is something with language, when it takes over, it takes you over, and it takes you, and you have to listen to it and know when the time is to really start doing it. And you can't control it. You just have to let it happen. And so this monologue is really very amoral in this kind of sense, that every kind of thing appears there, like in a goulash soup or in a soup or something. But there are structures in it too, yes, but you have to find out yourself. He says, well, get used to that there is no structure in it, but there is a structure. As in everything that has a certain time length, so there has to be a structure.
Yes. You said that you wrote constantly, even throughout the years where you were not, you know, making narrative films. So I'm wondering, did you write screenplays in that time? Does anything from The Lobby come from this period of writing?
No, I wrote screenplays, and I just finished 2 here that I started in the beginning of the 90s. One is called Black Harbor and the other the Schwarzschild projection. And they are big feature films. I don't know whether I will be able to do them, but I always had, and I have a lot of scripts of this time. I could start immediately. But I was working at the university, and you know, when you do that, you can't just quit and say for a year I go and do a feature film. Also, I was not really ready. It has to do with age. I mean, when I did this, The Holy Bunch, I was a nervous type. There were nervous breakdowns all the time. I feel like now I'm able to do feature films, and then I was not really able to. It was too much drama involved. So I'm glad that I had a time in between, and the time in between was 20 years.
So you said this started with this when you heard that Gaston Solnicki wanted to make a film about death in Vienna. So for you, is the starting point a film about death?
Uh,
I mean,
in a way, yes, because there are, in a conventional way, you're not allowed to tell about this like I did. And it's a grand theme for us all. And so I wanted to have a kind of encyclopedic approach to it. My experiences with it, with dead friends, and so on and so on. And so this piled up into that project. I mean, this thing with Gaston and Vienna is just a joke, but it's strange that something suddenly evolves because somebody mentioned something.
mm-hmm.
I think this whole thing about Vienna and this is really old. I mean,
But what about the idea of death as a taboo, which I think is
yeah,
something
it's a
that comes,
taboo.
yeah, which I think that comes across in the lobby. You're very aware of
Yes.
that, and you're also which also connects it, I think, to The Last City, which is a film about
Yes, I
taboo.
mean, that was a word I missed. I wanted to say in The Last City already. It's all these topics are taboo topics.
Right.
And death, of course, is the biggest taboo. You can, everybody thinks about it, nobody talks about it. And so I approached it as a taboo from all sides, yes. Mm.
So a taboo is something to be confronted, to be made fun of, to
Well,
be
taboos are sometimes so illogical.
yeah.
Well, let's, for example, in The Last City, let's talk about incest. Incest taboo is about that you don't bring up like retarded children or so when you have sex with your family. But what about when you don't create children? Is that a taboo then too? So it's illogical, but it's still a taboo. But so it raises a lot of logical questions, and this is what I'm into. I like to deal with logic within society or language or what. That's what I'm really interested in. Yeah. And the unnecessary taboos too that we still have to live with. Yes.
When we talked about The Last City, we also talked about humor, and just not. You said it wasn't something you had to find; it was just something that emerged. Not something you can really try for. But I wonder, with this film, as you say, death is the biggest taboo, and I think the text in The Lobby is even more extreme than in The Last City. I mean, it's.
And you know, this guy, I call him white old male. He has issues and he has moods. He is almost he's almost a Tourette guy. But so he changes his mood all the time, and we know, is this now earnest or what does he say now? What is he now? And we don't identify with him, of course not, because we listen to him, and we have to bring our own brain up to him. It's again not a person to identify with, but he's there. He's talking. He thinks he has a necessity to talk to us, and so it's a great way to develop connection to an audience, or even confronted or insulted, or so. It was fun writing it. I mean, I didn't tell you, but this film was just not taken by a festival because they said the guy is a misanthrope and therefore the film is misanthropic. And I think that is really fun. And so learned in terms of films. I have to laugh about it.
You said you did talk a little bit about working with John when we spoke about The Last City, but I'm wondering if you can just say a little bit more about him, since you have a very long friendship and working relationship with him, and this persona, this character that you've created over, not that they're all the same, but like this, do you see him in some ways as an alter ego, you know?
I couldn't, because he is a very elegant person. I'm not. And so maybe it's a projection. I would like to be as elegant as him or something. And I found out lately, I came to the US in '74. And the first film I saw in the US was Life of Performers. And that was in August or September 1974. So I saw him in the first one there. Of course, I didn't meet him. I met him 4 years later. But for me, John, he had a certain time. It was not acting. It was not film acting. I think he even got problems because he worked in Yvonne's films that like conventional films wouldn't take him, because he was in these kind of despised art films or so. And but he has this he knows very well what acting is and what film acting and theater, the different kind of actings and performances. And I like that, to have this theoretical approach to your profession, you know. So, and then, of course, in our love is for photography too. And so we know about images. We discuss it. We have a kind of similar approach to images, I think. And so it's easy to work together. You don't have to explain too much, you know. I couldn't do all these films. I did, like in the last years, I did 10 or 12 films. I couldn't do them if I wouldn't do the camera with myself and had to discuss it with camera people. I mean, it would take a year to do a film. Yeah. So I don't have that problem. And now I work with actors to have a wonderful crew, and we work really fast, but very, very well, because they all know what it is about. You know? Yeah.
Just to bring it back to the setting, the lobby. You said that you found many possible lobbies in Buenos Aires, and I'm wondering how this affected your approach to just thinking about space and composition, because in many of your films the spaces are much more, I guess, varied, but you're dealing with like the same type of space over and over again here. So I'm wondering if there was a difference in
but the
the
lobbies
production.
are very, very different. You see old ones,
Yeah.
new ones, modern ones, and ugly ones. And it's just one scene, the lobby, but the architecture is so amazingly different. So we shot each lobby once in the daytime and one in the nighttime. So we had 30 different locations in the film, and then of course all the different shots. But no, that was a decision. I want to have that space in between as a kind of, that might be a big symbol, a really large symbol on the film. But this decision, I didn't want him to be in his cozy bedroom or living space. I wanted to have it almost in the open. Sometimes you see people coming in, walking by. So it's a kind of a semi-public space, and his talk is semi-public too. He shouts at you, talking about the film theater. So yeah.
It's an interesting film to watch these days because he addresses, as you say, he addresses the spectator, and he specifically talks about their viewing circumstances too. So, you know, given that we're all navigating very strange configurations of that, the fear. I think he talks about being in an emptying cinema, and also being on a, you know,
Yeah,
addresses who are watching
thinking during his talk, and he likes
right.
that because his idea is that a big cinema with a lot of people has some fascist connotations, and he doesn't like crowds, you know.
Right.
And even then he said, "Oh, you might see this on a media device at
Right.
home in your cozy bed." And maybe it is like that now.
Which I think will be the case for some people.
I didn't know.
Yeah, no, that is definitely striking. So I want to thank you for the film, Heinz, and again, we're really disappointed that you couldn't be here, but you know, we'll show it in a cinema, emptying or not, eventually,
Great.
and hopefully you can join us.
Yeah,
Then.
thank you, Dennis. I really like to talk to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Heinz. That was great. Thanks so much.